Capital punishment. What is capital punishment? It is a state-sanctioned practice of killing a person which is still relevant and enforced in Malaysia today, especially when it comes to deterring serious and hideous crimes such as murder and drug trafficking. The death penalty is currently retained for 33 offences in Malaysia that include murder, drug trafficking, treason, act of terrorism, and waging war against the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, which are carried out by hanging. This form of the sentence, also known as death sentence, and the act of carrying out the sentence is known as an execution, with convicts commonly referred to as being on death row. The idea behind capital punishment in Malaysia arose from a mix of the common law system that Malaysia inherited during the period of British colonization and the use of capital punishment in Islam. Section 227 of the Criminal Procedure Codes state that, quote, when any person is sentenced to death, the sentence shall direct that the person be hanged by the neck until he or she is dead, but shall not state the place nor time when the sentence is to be carried out, end quote. However, there are exceptions to this ruling. According to Section 275 of the Criminal Procedure Code, a death sentence shall not be passed on to pregnant women. Recently, the government agreed to abolish the mandatory death penalty, giving a judge discretion when it comes to sentencing. The Cabinet of the Government of Malaysia announced on June 10, 2022 that it had reached an agreement to abolish the nation's mandatory death penalty laws and submit legalization to Parliament to provide judges discretion to impose other penalties for capital crimes. Law Minister Wan Junaidi Tuanku Jaafar said the cabinet also agreed to study proposals to substitute sentences for those currently on death row for offences carrying out the death penalty.
In our country, Malaysia, there are various types of crime. Some of them are murder, drive-by killing, money laundering, drug trafficking, fraud, black marketing, and many other more. The most significant problems or crimes in Malaysia will be sex trafficking and corruption. Statistics show that the crime rate in Malaysia has declined by 11.9% in 2018 compared to the previous year, which is 2017. Despite a reduced crime rate, the public perception of crime did not improve. According to the Royal Malaysia Police, the cities and towns which have the highest number of criminal cases are Petaling Jaya, Johor Bahru, Bukit Mertajam, Ipoh, and Kuantan. Drug trafficking is a problem, and heroin is the most used drug. The maximum penalty for drug trafficking is up to death. It is a measure that was introduced during the 1980s to combat drug offences and was highlighted after the execution of Brian Geoffrey Chambers and Kelvin John Barlow in 1986. Malaysia is a destination and supply as well as a transit point for women and children trafficked for commercial sexual exploitation. Every single year, quite a lot of women and girls are trafficked to Malaysia from Burma, Cambodia, China, Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. Not only that, Malaysia is a transit country along with Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand in Chinese human trafficking. Women from Malaysia are trafficked to the People's Republic of China. Migrants from countries work as domestic servants and laborers in the construction and agricultural sector and face exploitative conditions in our country. From the year 2005 until September 2009, there are more than 36,858 women were arrested for prostitution in Malaysia.
Few areas of criminal justice have sparked as much debate as the death penalty. The public strongly supports the death penalty, even though there are strong arguments suggesting that it should be abolished. Retribution in this debate is the idea that the death penalty is needed to bring about the justice for the victims' families, and the society. The state has the absolute right to take the life of a person who has proved himself a great menace to society by the way of self-defense and as an example and warning to others. It is needed as a retribution to argue that an eye for an eye is appropriate, that the punishment should match the crime, and that the penalty is needed as a moral balance to the wrong done by the criminal. It is needed to bring about a closure and solace to the victims' families, and argues that the finality of the death penalty is needed for families to move on and not live in fear of the criminal getting out of prison. For example, the murder is the unlawful killing of another human without justification or valid excuse, especially the unlawful killing of another human with the malice aforethought. This state of mind may, depending upon the jurisdiction, distinguish murder from other forms of unlawful homicide, such as manslaughter. Manslaughter is a killing committed in the absence of a malice, brought about by reasonable provocation or diminished capacity.
According to the Arms Act 1960, absolutely no one is allowed to possess, carry or use any firearms or ammunition, which is the gun and bullet, without a valid firearm license. We also need to have a legal permit to own the imitation or fake gun that has the appearance of a real firearm. Those who are caught in possession of an unlicensed firearm can face serious consequences. For instance, if you are caught having a gun without any documentation, you could face a minimum sentence of 14 years in prison and 6 strokes of the cane. If you are caught discharging or firing a gun at someone with the intent to injure or kill that people, then it is the death penalty. You even be slapped with a charge if you fail to report to police if you know someone carrying an unlicensed gun. Well, if you ever decide to go gun shopping, then you should know that acquiring a legal firearm in Malaysia is a relatively simple process, but getting the application approved might prove difficult. If you are a Malaysian citizen over the age of 18 who is physically and mentally fit and does not have any prior criminal record, you are able to own a gun here in Malaysia. Being a gun owner is no cakewalk, and there are a whole lots of responsibilities attached to having the power to kill a person literally in your pocket. Besides knowing how to use and maintain the weapon safely and responsibly, you would have to abide by strict restrictions on the type of weapon and the amount of ammunition you are allowed to carry. Well, if a gun owner happens to slip up in any way, like misplacing a weapon or any of its bullets, or even being caught with a gun while being intoxicated, then be prepared to have the license revoked and be slapped with either heavy fines or jail sentences, or both.
In short, a crime is an act that breaks the law, whereas a penalty is something society administers to criminals via the legal system. The main idea of crime and punishment are that crime is intended to be stopped by punishment, while penalties are supposed to stop crime. It is clear that crime rates are increasing day by day in all societies in the world, but I believe that governments and individuals can do a lot to reduce crime in communities. For a society to be a safe place to live, all members of society, including government and citizens, must take the necessary steps to make a crime-free place. People should live by abiding by some rules and regulations. Breaking those rules is subject to punishment. The level of punishment depends upon the severity of the crime of violation. The death penalty is the most severe punishment for the commission of a crime. In this case, there are pros and cons to the proposal to abolish it, with the proponents of the death penalty arguing that it is an important tool for preserving law and order within society as well as deterring crime. The same group also argued that retribution, or an eye for an eye, honors the victim, helps console grieving families, and ensure that perpetrators of the crime never get the chance or opportunity to inflict more injury or suffering on others. Opponents of the death penalty argue that it has no deterrent effect on crime.
gives government the wrong permission to take human life, and perpetuates social injustice by disproportionately targeting people of color and others who cannot afford good lawyers. They assert that lifetime jail sentences are a more severe and less expensive punishment than death. The right to be punished is a basic right of any individual in an organized human society. Accordingly, any individual who has been found criminally liable has the right to be punished fairly, decently, and honestly. These include the right not to be punished excessively. Thus, modern doctrinal sentencing is a broad theory that corresponds to the fundamental concepts of criminal law and allows individuals to plan their future actions.